Have you ever cast your favorite lure on a scorching hot summer day, reeled it in like a madman, and caught absolutely nothing? We have all heard the old saying, warm water speeds up a fish's metabolism, so they want a fast-moving bait, right? Well, what if I told you that this golden rule of summer fishing is completely wrong? Today, we are breaking down a fishing myth that has probably cost you dozens of trophy catches over the years. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will look at hot water fishing in a completely different way. You are going to discover the unexpected truth about why your fast retrieve is actually scaring the fish away instead of triggering a bite. We are going to reveal the real reason why so many anglers struggle when the temperature rises, and how doing the exact opposite of what you were taught will fill your live well. So, before we dive into this, I want to ask you a question to get the comments rolling. Do you honestly believe that fish want to chase a fast lure when the water is boiling hot? Let me know down below, and let us get into the real story. To understand why we need to change our approach, we first have to look at why this topic is so incredibly important for every angler out there. Summer fishing makes up a huge portion of the days we spend on the water. We all grew up reading the same magazines and listening to the same grandpas at the bait shop. The traditional wisdom always said that because fish are cold-blooded animals, warm water fires up their system. The logic seems to make perfect sense on the surface. If their bodies are warm, they must be burning calories quickly, and therefore they must be aggressive and willing to chase down a meal moving at lightning speed. Because of this deeply rooted belief, millions of fishermen hit the water every July and August, doing the exact same thing they have done for decades. They tie on a crankbait or a spinnerbait, put their boat in high gear, and burn their lures through the water, trying to force a reaction bite. But then they sit there, scratching their heads when the sun gets high and the bite completely shuts down. The problem is that we took a basic biological fact and stretched it way too far, ignoring how extreme heat actually affects underwater life. Let us paint a picture that you probably know all too well. It is mid-July, the sun is beating down on the water, and the surface temperature is hovering around 85 degrees. You are standing on the deck of your boat, or maybe on the muddy bank of your local pond, sweating right through your favorite fishing shirt. You tie on a flashy lure, cast it out as far as you can, and start cranking that reel handle like your life depends on it. You do this because you have always been told that warm water makes fish super aggressive. You cast and reel, moving fast to cover water. You might see a splash in the distance, but your lure goes completely untouched. You start wondering if there are even any fish left in this lake. But what if I told you that the fish are right there, watching your bait zoom by and actively deciding not to chase it? The reality of a hot summer morning is very different from what we imagine. By reeling like a madman, you are actually fishing right past the biggest catch of your life. Let us talk about the biological myth that has been fooling us for years. Yes, fish are cold-blooded, and yes, warming water does speed up their metabolism up to a certain point. When water warms up in the spring, fish wake up and get hungry. But there is a massive difference between comfortably warm water and a summer heat wave. When the water temperature climbs into the high 80s or even the 90s, fish do not turn into Olympic sprinters. Instead, they become heavily stressed. Think about how you feel when it is 100 degrees outside with massive humidity. Do you want to go run a marathon, or do you want to sit in the shade and sip a cold drink? Fish feel the exact same way. Extreme heat drains their energy. They do not want to burn precious calories chasing down a bait that is flying by them at 10 miles an hour. They want an easy meal that wanders right into their face. When you understand that extreme heat equals stress, you start to realize why a fast retrieve is the worst thing you can do. You really have to think about the comfort zone of the fish you are targeting. When the surface of the lake feels hot enough to boil an egg, fish look for relief. They dive down deep to find a thermocline, which is a layer of cooler, more comfortable water. Down there, they become very sluggish and selective. Imagine you are sitting in a blazing hot sauna, barely able to breathe. If someone throws a sandwich past you at top speed, you're not going to jump up and chase it down the hall. But if someone hands you a piece of food right in your lap, you might just eat it. This is exactly how a big bass or walleye thinks in the dead of summer. They are preserving their energy for survival. They will absolutely feed, but the return on investment has to make sense for them. Chasing a fast-moving crankbait takes more energy than the fish will get back from eating it, so they simply watch it go by. You have to serve the food on a silver platter, moving it at a snail's pace to convince them to open their mouths. Let us break down what happens under the midday sun. It is high noon, there are no clouds in the sky, and you are casting near a long wooden dock. You decide to throw a spinnerbait, and you burn it right past the wooden pilings. A big fish is tucked far underneath that dock, using the heavy shadows to stay cool and protect its eyes from the glaring sun. That fish sees your shiny blades flash by for about half a second. By the time its brain registers that it might be food, your lure is already 10 feet away. The fish is not going to abandon its shady sanctuary, swim out into the blazing hot, bright water, and sprint to catch your spinnerbait. It simply takes too much effort and causes too much discomfort. The midday heat completely shuts down their desire to roam. They lock tightly onto cover, whether that is a dock, a lay-down tree, or a patch of thick weeds. If your bait is moving fast, it is spending zero time in the actual strike zone where the fish is currently living. Now, let us look at the incredible revelation that happens when you finally decide to slow down. Imagine you are at that exact same wooden dock, but this time, instead of burning a moving bait, you tie on a soft plastic worm. You cast it right to the edge of the shadow, and you let it sink all the way to the bottom. You do not reel, you just let it sit there. Maybe you give the rod tip a tiny twitch, moving the bait just an inch or two. Suddenly you feel a heavy thump on your line. You set the hook, and you are fighting a massive fish. Why did this work? Because you presented an easy, helpless target. The fish did not have to leave its comfortable shade. It did not have to expend a massive amount of energy. It just saw a vulnerable meal slowly twitching in front of its nose. An instinct took over. The strike comes not from aggression but from convenience. This simple change from a fast horizontal movement to a slow, subtle vertical movement is the secret to unlocking the tough summer bite. We also need to pay close attention to the behavior of the real bait fish in the water during these hot months. Anglers often think they need to reel fast to mimic fleeing bait fish, but if you actually take a moment to observe the shallows on a blistering hot afternoon, what do you see? The bluegill, the shad, and the minnows are not zooming around at top speed. They are hovering lazily near the surface, hiding in the grass beds, and barely moving their fins. They are trying to survive the heat, just like the predatory fish are. If the natural forage is moving slowly and lethargically, why would you present a lure that looks like it drank 10 cups of coffee? Predatory fish are deeply tuned into the natural rhythms of their environment. When they see something moving at an unnatural speed during the hottest part of the day, it looks suspicious. It does not look like real food. By slowing down your retrieve, you are perfectly mimicking the natural, lazy movements of the local baitfish, which builds confidence and triggers far more bites from wary predators. Now, we have to talk about the one exception that always trips people up and keeps the fast retrieve myth alive. That exception is the early morning bite. Yes, right at the crack of dawn, you can absolutely throw a topwater frog or a buzzbait and reel it fairly quickly to get those explosive strikes. But why does this happen? It is because the water has had all night to cool down. The surface temperature drops slightly in the dark, and the fish use this short window of comfortable temperatures to actively hunt in the shallows. But here is the trap that catches so many anglers. They catch one good fish at 6 in the morning on a fast-moving bait, and they stubbornly stick with that same presentation for the rest of the day. As soon as that summer sun breaks over the tree line and starts cooking the water, the rules of the game change completely. The active window slams shut. The fish retreat to cover, and you must transition your tactics from fast and aggressive to slow and methodical if you want to keep catching fish past 8 or 9 in the morning. Let us dive into the actual science of the water itself, specifically the oxygen levels. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle that most casual fishermen completely ignore. Cold water naturally holds a lot of dissolved oxygen, which makes it very easy for fish to breathe. But as water temperatures rise into the 80s and 90s, its ability to hold dissolved oxygen drops dramatically. Warm water literally has less air in it. Imagine trying to run a sprint at a high altitude where the air is incredibly thin. You would be gasping for breath and your legs would feel like lead. That is exactly what a fish experiences in a hot summer lake. They are literally breathing heavier and functioning with far less oxygen going to their muscles. Because of this, they physically cannot afford to chase a fast-moving meal for any significant distance. They have to conserve their oxygen for basic survival. When you reel a crankbait past a fish struggling with low oxygen, they simply cannot commit to the chase. You have to slow down and put the bait right in front of them. There is nothing more frustrating than fishing with a buddy who absolutely refuses to adapt to the conditions. We all know this guy. You are sharing a boat on a blazing hot Saturday afternoon. He is throwing a heavy spoon or a lipless crankbait, bombing it out there and cranking it back as fast as his arms can move. He is cursing the lake, complaining that the fish are gone, and saying the weather is just too hot to catch anything. Meanwhile, you have tied on a simple drop-shot rig or a slow-moving jig. You are dragging it across the bottom at a painfully slow pace, feeling every single rock and pebble. While your buddy is throwing a temper tantrum, you quietly set the hook and reel in the only fish of the day. The psychology of slowing down is tough for a lot of people to master. We are wired to believe that more action and more casts equal more fish. But summer fishing requires immense patience. You have to fight your own instincts to speed up and let the slow, subtle presentation do the hard work for you. If you are going to commit to fishing slowly in the summer, you also need to rethink your tackle setup. When you are burning a bait, you can get away with heavy line and a stiff rod because the fish are hitting it on the run and practically hooking themselves. But when you slow down, everything changes. The bites become incredibly subtle. You need lighter fluorocarbon line because it is practically invisible in the clear summer water and it sinks, helping your slow baits stay near the bottom. You need a highly sensitive rod that allows you to feel the difference between a rock, a piece of weed, and a fish gently inhaling your bait. Even the baits themselves need to change. A big plastic worm with a massive curly tail that requires a lot of speed to create action might not be the best choice. Instead, a straight tail worm that just subtly quivers with the slightest movement of your rod tip is often far more effective. The goal is maximum natural movement with minimum forward speed. Dialing in your tackle makes this slow presentation deadly. Let us talk about deep water structure, which is where a huge percentage of the big fish go to escape the summer heat. We are talking about offshore ledges, steep drop-offs, and underwater points that sit in 15 to 30 feet of water. If you cast a heavy football jig out to one of these ledges and try to hop it quickly back to the boat, you are making a massive mistake. When you move the bait fast in deep water, it lifts off the bottom and completely leaves the strike zone. To catch these deep, lethargic summer fish, you have to drag that jig so slowly that you can feel it scraping against the mussel shells and rocks down there. You are essentially creeping the bait along the ledge. If you hit a stump or a rock, you do not rip it free. You pause. You let it sit there for 5, 10, or even 15 seconds. That pause is exactly when the big fish swims over and sucks it in. It requires immense focus to fish this slowly in deep water, but it is exactly what the big ones demand in August. Have you ever tried the dead stick technique? It sounds incredibly boring, and honestly, to a lot of action-loving fishermen, it is. But when the water is boiling hot and the fish are completely shut down, dead sticking is an absolutely deadly tactic. This involves casting out a soft plastic bait, usually unweighted or lightly weighted, letting it slowly flutter to the bottom, and then doing absolutely nothing. You just watch your line. You do not reel. You do not twitch the rod. You just let the natural water currents give the bait a lifelike, breathing motion. Many anglers simply do not have the patience for this. They let it sit for 2 seconds and then start reeling. But if you can force yourself to let that bait sit perfectly still on the bottom for up to a minute, you will be shocked at the results. A big, lazy fish will often swim up to it, stare at it, and eventually eat it just because it looks like a dead or dying piece of forage that requires zero effort to consume. Dead sticking catches the monsters that fast presentations leave behind. When you transition to this incredibly slow summer fishing style, you also have to relearn how to read a strike. When you are reeling a crankbait fast, a bite feels like a violent collision. The rod gets yanked out of your hand. But when you are creeping a bait along the bottom in the heat of the day, the bite is completely different. Often there is no tap at all. It is just a slight pressure, as if your lure suddenly got hooked on a wet sponge. The line might just feel heavy, or you might notice your line slowly swimming off to the side, even though you are not reeling. You have to become a line watcher. If you feel anything unusual, any mushy feeling or sudden loss of contact with the bottom, you have to swing hard and set the hook. Lethargic summer fish will often just open their mouths, suck the bait in, and sit perfectly still. If you are not paying close attention to your line tension and the subtle cues of your rod tip, you will never even know they are there, and they will quietly spit the hook out. We cannot talk about summer fishing without talking about the critical role of shade. Fish do not have eyelids. When the summer sun is blazing overhead, the light penetration is intense and painful for them. They seek out the darkest shade they can find. This means they are buried deep under lily pads, way in the back of boat docks, or tucked tightly against overhanging trees. If you cast a bait near the shade and quickly pull it out into the sunlight, the fish will not follow it. You have to put the bait right on their head and keep it there. This is where techniques like punching heavy cover come into play. You drop a heavy jig straight down through the thick weeds, right into their dark living room, and instead of reeling it in, you just gently shake the rod tip, making the bait hop in place without actually moving it away. You are essentially annoying the fish into a reaction strike. You are invading their safe space and refusing to leave until they open their mouths. It is a slow, methodical hand-to-hand combat. Even if you decide to beat the heat by going night fishing during the summer, the slow rule still strongly applies. Many anglers think that because the sun is down, they can go back to burning their baits across the surface. While fish are definitely more active at night, you still have to remember that visibility is near zero. If you reel a bait too fast in the dark, a fish might hear the vibration, but they will have a very hard time tracking it down and getting a clean bite on it. At night, a slow, steady retrieve with a big, dark-colored bait is the ultimate strategy. You want a lure that moves a lot of water and creates a strong vibration, like a big Colorado blade spinnerbait. But you want to slow roll it. Creep it along just fast enough to keep the blade turning. This steady, rhythmic and slow thumping gives the predator plenty of time to lock onto the sound, track the movement in the pitch-black water, and ambush the bait with perfect accuracy. Slow and steady wins the race, even under the moonlight. You also have to consider how the summer wind plays a role in your slow retrieve strategy. A hot summer breeze can actually be your best friend if you know how to use it. The wind pushes warmer surface water and microscopic food into specific pockets and shorelines, drawing the bait fish and the predators with it. But fishing slowly in the wind can be tricky because the breeze creates a bow in your line, making it hard to feel those subtle, lethargic bites. Instead of getting frustrated and switching to a fast-moving bait, use the wind to your advantage. Cast your weightless worm or light jig out and let the wind literally blow your line across the water. The wind will slowly drag your bait across the bottom for you, providing a highly natural, unforced presentation. You do not even need to use your reel, just watch the bow in your line. When the line suddenly stops moving with the wind or twitches in the opposite direction, you know a fish has picked it up. Let the elements do the slow fishing for you. Now, does this mean you have to completely put away your hard baits and crankbaits until the fall? Absolutely not. You can still fish reaction baits in the summer, but you have to change how you retrieve them. Instead of burning a shallow square-bill crankbait, tie on a deep diving plug. Crank it down quickly, just to get it to the bottom, but the moment it hits the structure, stop reeling. Let the lure pause and slowly float up for several seconds. Then give it one reel turn to make it dive back down and hit the bottom again, and then stop completely. This is called the stop-and-go retrieve, and it is a massive producer in the heat. It mimics a dying bait fish that is struggling to swim and taking long breaks. Almost every single strike will come during the pause, right when the lure is sitting perfectly still or slowly rising. By adding long pauses to your hard baits, you are giving the lethargic fish the time they need to swim over and inspect the easy meal without having to chase it down. Succeeding in the dead of summer is really a game of mental fortitude and patience. It is incredibly hot, you are uncomfortable, the sweat is dripping into your eyes, and you probably want to be sitting in air conditioning. When anglers get uncomfortable and frustrated, their natural human tendency is to fish faster. We subconsciously speed up our retrieve because we want to cover as much water as possible, hopefully catch a fish quickly, and go home. You have to recognize this psychological trap and fight against it. When you feel yourself getting hot and impatient, take a deep breath, put your rod down for a minute, drink some water, and force yourself to reset. Remind yourself that fishing faster is only going to prolong the struggle. Make a conscious, deliberate choice to pick up a slow-moving bait and fish it with intense focus. The angler who can maintain their patience and keep their lure barely moving on a 95-degree day is the angler who is going to find the secret honey hole that everyone else missed. Another massive factor when slowing down your summer presentation is the actual size of the bait you are using. When fish are highly stressed from hot water and low oxygen, they do not always want to commit to eating a massive meal. Think about it. When you are feeling sick or exhausted from the heat, you probably do not want to sit down and eat a giant steak. You might just want a handful of crackers. Fish operate the same way. When you slow down your retrieve, you should also consider downsizing your lure. Drop down from a massive 10-inch worm to a small 4-inch finesse worm. Switch out the big jig for a tiny Ned rig. A small, compact bait, moving incredibly slowly across the bottom, looks like a tiny, bite-sized snack that requires absolutely zero effort to swallow. This combination of a slow presentation and a micro-sized bait is often the golden ticket to catching heavily pressured, heat-stressed bass that are ignoring every other traditional lure thrown their way. Let us summarize what a successful day on the water really looks like when you put all of these pieces together. The morning starts off, and maybe you catch a quick fish on top water. But as soon as the sun gets high, you immediately switch gears. You know the oxygen levels are dropping. You know the fish are retreating to the deep ledges or the heavy shade. You tie on a subtle finesse presentation. You cast into the shadows or drag the deep drop-offs with extreme patience. You ignore the guy in the boat next to you who is frantically casting and reeling a loud crankbait to no avail. You watch your line for the tiniest twitch. You let your bait dead stick on the bottom for agonizingly long pauses. At the end of the day, the guy who burned his baits all afternoon goes home with a massive sunburn, sore shoulders, and an empty live well. But you, the angler who understood the biology of summer fish and had the discipline to slow down, go home with pictures of giant fish and a story to tell. Slowing down is the ultimate summer secret. So, let us wrap this all up. We have completely busted the old myth that warm water means you have to fish with a lightning-fast retrieve. The biggest takeaway here, the real plot twist, is that extreme summer heat actually exhausts fish just as much as it exhausts us. The low oxygen, the bright sun, and the high temperatures turn them into lazy opportunists, not aggressive hunters. The moment you accept this and force yourself to slow down, to use pauses, and to drop baits right into their shady living rooms, everything changes. You go from hoping for a random reaction strike to purposely feeding fish that thought they were too tired to eat. This shift in mindset will completely revolutionize how you approach those dog days of summer. I want to thank you so much for hanging out and watching today. If this video gave you a light bulb moment and is going to help you catch more fish this weekend, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like on the video. It really helps the channel grow. Now, I want to hear from you. What is the longest you have ever let a bait sit perfectly still in the water before getting a massive bite? Drop your best dead-sticking stories in the comments below and let us talk fishing. Stay safe out on the water, and we will see you in the next one.